Howdy folks. Today we're going to talk about the box model. The box model is a really important thing in HTML because it helps us figure out how big an element is on the page and how it works out. So let me just show you. I'm going to open up my inspector. So this is how Chrome has this. This is the box model over here on the side. So you can see right now if I go to the body, there's not much in there, but there's margin, border, padding, and then the actual size. And we'll talk about this as we go along. So let me make a div, just a simple div, okay, just so we have something to look at. So if we start off here, you look at the size here. That is actually kind of small. Can I make that bigger? I can. There we go. That's maybe a little bit easier to see. So the size here is, and if I mouse over here, you can see it's also in the kind of in a box there, 658 width by 18 height. That is the content. And by default, this will hug the content on the vertical. And because it's a div, it is a block display. It will take up as much space as possible on the horizontal. If I set it to display inline, you can see it suddenly gets a lot smaller. I don't know what that just did. And you notice also at this point the size has gone auto. And that is basically saying it's not really handling its own size. Its size is dependent on its content. So that's that. Let's take a look at padding then. So let's say I set this color. I'm going to set a background color on this just so we can see the difference. Let's see. Let's do gray. And set the text to white so we can still see it. So padding is this first box here. Padding makes kind of space in between the element, the edge of the element, and its inner content. So if I set padding to 10 pixels, you can see what that does is that puts space, kind of hard to see, it puts space around the content. So that padding, that background color is still gray because this is still that div. And most importantly, padding contributes to the width and height. So if I actually have this set to a width of 200 pixels, let's say, and turn off the display inline, you can see it actually shows up as 220 pixels. If I mouse over here, just look at the little box that shows up here. Why is that? Because there's 10 pixels of padding on each side. So this is 200 pixels of width plus 20 pixels of padding. Same with the height. It's 18 pixels and plus 20, so the full height is 38.4. So padding does affect your width, and this can be really important if you've got content that can't go above a certain size, like maybe if it gets bigger than 150, your page starts messing up. Then you want to be careful when you put padding on it because it's going to affect this. Now, border. Let's take a look at border. Border, and you can kind of even see here, these are dotted lines. This is not a dotted line. This indicates everything here is inside the element. So if I give it a border, oops, there it is. Let's say 10, let's go 5 pixels solid red. That also makes the element bigger. So notice now it's 230 pixels by 48 because the border also increases the size. Border has different types. So I could have a dashed border. And you can see the empty space in that border is actually made up by the gray because it is still part of that div. So the padding and the border both increase the size, and they are still a part of that element. The margin, on the other hand, the margin does not make it bigger. It is still 230 here. What the margin does is it pushes it away from everything else. So if I have something, oh, now I'm realizing if I change this, so let me just edit this in here. This is something you can do. It's not super recommended. But I could put some more content in here. You can see that is now pushed away from this element by the margin. it'd be right here, right next to it. But if I turn that margin, it gets pushed away. The margin does not expand the element, it simply makes room around it. And you can see that's why we have that solid line here. There's the margin, border, padding, and here. One thing about borders that can be kind of fun, is on hover. So let's say I have a specific hover class. Well, I'm going to put this in there. I'll do it like this. Fine. I'll actually put some styles in here. Okay. Solid red. And then the regular div has a background color of gray. Width of 100 pixels. And a padding, let's say a padding of 5 pixels. Not 50. 50 would be quite a bit. So, see what happens when I mouse over it. It adds that border and actually gets bigger. That's kind of annoying, right? And the reason that's happening is because the border actually causes the element to get bigger. So there is a specific property for dealing with this. So if you want to be able to put this border around this item without it growing in size, you can use the outline property. And outlines do not have a size because they can't really be above 1 pixel. At least I'm pretty sure they don't have a size. But you see what happens here. Outlines are actually a little bit like margins. They appear outside the content. They do not make the element any bigger. All right. So that's kind of the idea there. So if you want something you're okay with only having 1 pixel, kind of small, then you can use an outline and it will not make your content bigger. The other thing you can do is on hover, like I could set my width to 98 pixels. Okay, and let's say I have a height in here of like maybe 40. I could set my height to 38. And what that's going to do is when I mouse over this, you see the content kind of messes up. So you want to do something with the padding as well. But it's actually making the element slightly smaller in its width and height, whereas the border is starting to take up that new space. So that's kind of how you handle that as well. So those are the 4 pieces of the box layout. There's the size, the padding, the border, all of which make your element bigger. And then there's the margin, which pushes your element away from things around it. As always, I hope this is helpful, and I'll see you all next time.